And it's time to begin our webinar. We are so excited that you all decided to join us this morning. Seeing your faces pop up here on the screen just puts a smile on my face. I'm just so excited that you were willing to take some time this morning to join us. And you're in for a treat. We have two special guests with us this morning, Josh and Allie Worsham. But before I go there, I wanted to introduce myself. I am Kevin Doherty. I'm a Senior Director for Sales in Texas, and I work with my partners here, and I'd like to introduce Jennifer King. Jennifer is based in the Austin, Houston area. Jody Attar, and there's Jody, and Jody is in Indiana. And then we also have Amanda Austin, and Amanda is based in San Jose, California. So we're all over the globe here, and I know from looking at the list of people that are joining us that you're from all over the US as well. So thank you again for spending some time with us today. So it's my pleasure to have the opportunity to introduce to you Josh Worsham and Allie Worsham. Josh is currently the principal at Ware East Texas Montessori Academy. And yes, I did write it down so I could remember to say it correctly. It's part of the East Texas Advanced Academies, which is a public charter in Longview ISD. And Allie Worsham. Allie is an IT specialist in Longview ISD. She is actually the reigning instructional technology specialist of the year for the state of Texas. Tonight, a new person will be named for 2020 or 21. Which is it, Allie?
21.
For 21. Awesome. Well, Josh and Allie attended one of the first Z-Space trainings of trainers that we conducted here in Texas, and we're opening that up now more broadly in the US. In fact, some of you may be attending the TOT that starts next week with Jody Attar. And they were at the training in Richardson, Texas at Region 10. And while we were there, they were able to, during just the first 2 days of the training, they were aligning our Z-Space lessons that are available at our website with their instruction. They were identifying ways in which Z-Space could serve to fill gaps in student learning needs as evidenced by the previous year's STAR, the state test results. So all of that in 2 days. And we just stood there, Jody and I, in awe, watching these two young educators do such amazing work. So they are truly two of the most talented, innovative, skilled young educators that I've had the opportunity to work with and with whom to partner in my past nearly 4 decades of being an educator. So again, it is my great pleasure to introduce them to you, Josh Worsham and Allie Worsham. Thank you guys for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. That was a great introduction. Hopefully live up to all of that. I do want to, before we get started, I do want to point out we are married. We are together. We're a couple, in case anyone's curious. So why we have the last name. We're not brother, sister, or anything like that. Allie, do you want to start your presentation?
Yeah. Do that real quick, just in case anyone wants it. I'll go ahead and paste the link to this as well. And we're going. All right, can you guys see my screen? Good to go? Okay. All right, so we are working on enhancing K12 STEM and CTE with AR and VR. And Kevin already kind of did our introduction, but I'm Allie. I have a master's in curriculum instruction and in education administration. There we go. And I am an instructional technology specialist in Longview, Texas. I was a former struggling student. I feel like my call in education is really to change the landscape of education. I was the kid who was inside for recess every day in 2nd grade. I had to go to summer school in 3rd and 4th, so I wouldn't be held back. I had detention every day in 6th and 7th grade. And I just all around wasn't interested in anything. I've kind of been since realized that I am actually a GT student who was never identified. My teacher told my mom not to have me tested because I wouldn't be able to keep up with the work. But I think because of that, I wasn't engaged because the work was mundane and boring to me. So I really try to find ways to engage our students in innovative, creative ways that really meet a variety of learning styles and interests. And zSpace is one of my favorite things to bring to my teachers because it's really engaging for students. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about today. Josh, is there anything you want to say about yourself?
Sure. I'm Josh Worsham. I have the same master's degrees as my wife with the principal certification. I am the principal at Ware East Texas Montessori Academy, part of East Texas Advanced Academies, a public charter. One of the earliest adopters of the public charter program here in Texas, and certainly one of the largest as well. I was working at the time when we started that charter as a STEAM coordinator and a science teacher at a middle school. I moved into curriculum after that. And I think the whole, purpose behind us being introduced to the possibilities with AR, VR came from us just trying to be innovative. We were fortunate to be starting a charter program. Our leader, our CEO, Dr. Cynthia Wise, believed in innovation. She knew that education had to move forward, and she knew that we had to have some, unique form of innovation on campus beyond just our makerspace labs and our STEAM learns and all that sort of stuff. And AR VR was kind of the thing that was left for us to tap into that we hadn't really found a great platform for. But since adopting it and really buying into it and implementing it throughout our campuses, the doors have been blown open by all the possibilities with AR VR. And that's kind of what we want to talk to you about today, is all the different things that, adding that to your campus and your curriculum can really change for your students, their experience, even for your teachers too.
Okay, so Josh and I always like to think big about problems and solutions. Big problems require really big solutions and big ideas and thinking out of the box and being creative. And we find that the bigger the idea, the more out of the box it is, the better it really ends up solving all of our problems in one thing versus trying to have a bunch of different initiatives just to cover a few different things. So we really try to think big through this. Josh kind of already talked about our district demographic with having the charters. We are a 6A urban district. 80% of our student body is Hispanic and African American. Josh actually works at a bilingual campus, so half of his staff and classes are fully in Spanish, and those students are learning English and transferring over to a different language as well. And then 60% of our students in the district are economically disadvantaged. Some of our campuses specifically, like one of my campuses is 91% disadvantaged. So there's a lot of variety in that as well. So there's a lot to kind of work with and a lot of differences throughout our district. It's a rather wide or like long district. So we kind of see a bunch of different neighborhoods and students and that kind of thing. So our first thinking big is how do we get students engaged? So how are we going to meet the needs of today's learners? I'm a really big fan of talking about Gen Z. They blow my mind all the time, but because they're a different generation than us, they approach things differently and they learn things differently. And we're doing our students a really big injustice if we're not considering those needs of their generation as we plan and talk. So I always like to start off my presentations with who is our audience? Our audience is Gen Z. And so I want to spend just a few moments to really make sure that everyone here is thinking about Gen Z and how they're unique in their learning. One thing that always kind of blows my mind is 100% of our students belong to Gen Z, whether it's pre-K3 or a senior, all those kids are Gen Z right now. I'm sure at some point in the future, our little biddies will have a different generation label, but for now they're Gen Z. And so it's really important to sort of reflect on your pedagogy and think about, does that reflect who your students are? The interesting thing is their attention spans. Josh and I are both millennials. I have the worst attention span ever, partially because I'm very ADD, which he will tell you about all the time. But Gen Z, because of their exposure, they're actually down to about 8 seconds versus we're at about 12. So they need things a lot quicker. They're the first true digital natives. They've never had a situation where technology was like a treat for the day. They didn't go to the classroom to play Oregon Trail because it was a Friday and we'd been good all week. It's just part of who they are. And it's sort of like electricity to us. Like we would be very thrown off if we went to school and there just wasn't electricity. So our students are the same way with technology. If we just pull technology completely away from them, they don't understand why. Why wouldn't you use this thing that you have right in front of you? They don't know life without that. That's kind of what I talked about. And they do process information a lot faster. I've heard a lot of teachers say, they don't really focus. They're not getting it. It's the delivery. If you will present information in the way that Gen Z learns and the way that they are engaged, those kids are going to pick up on it really fast. And then about 72% get their information from YouTube. This was actually from a few years ago. I'm going to venture off and say now it's probably more like 90% get it from TikTok. There's so much information and so much learning that's happening on those platforms. And it's not just dancing and like goofy games, like they're actually doing things. If you look at how kids have changed politics and they can't even vote just off of an app, like it's mind blowing. So really think through that and think about how your delivery is working with their strengths. In a study from Forbes, they found that 51% of Gen Z prefer to learn by doing. The beauty in AR and VR, especially with ZSpace, because that's what we bought, so I'm going to talk about ZSpace a little bit, is they are actively participating. They have to have that pen in their hand. They have to be engaging in it. They can't just sit back and have a sit and get. So they are learning by being experienced, being immersed in that, having a unique opportunity at school for the day that makes a Tuesday different from a Wednesday. So that's what they're wanting. Josh, do you want to add anything to that? Because I kind of just took over and I'm sorry.
No, that was good. I think she really hit the nail on the head. You know, education's moving away from a teacher standing at the front of the class and lecturing for 90 minutes. And it's really about hands-on. And through AR, VR, we can give our students those experiences, those hands-on experiences that they wouldn't get, you know, any other way in some instances, that really meet their needs and really meet the kind of crazy experience they need to remember the content and, you know, and be able to replicate that throughout their career. So I think Allie really hit the nail on the head. That 12% one that you showed a second ago, 12% by listening. A teacher standing up and talking is not going to reach very many students. We want to reach as many as possible and give them exactly what they need to be successful. And, you know, STEAM programs are great. Makerspace is wonderful. And adding that AR, VR component is really what pushes it over the top. It makes it great for every student and every teacher and even the community involved. I mean, it's an amazing thing. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we move forward through our kind of journey with this as we keep going.
Hey, side note, Josh, I know this is like informal. I'm used to presenting next to you in the same room. So just talk if you need to jump in. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So next we're talking about creating equity by meeting the needs of our struggling learners. Equity is a really big conversation that we have in our district because we have so many students who are from wealthy families, and then we have so many students that don't know where they're going to sleep that night. And so we really need to try to find a way to kind of bridge that and make a same experience for everybody. So the things that we tend to see in our inequities in education, the economically advantaged, they're going to have a higher understanding of things. They travel. They have a broader perspective because they travel, and they tend to have family from all over the US. And they just have exposure to different experiences. They can go to Six Flags, they can go to Disneyland, they can go, you know, to Europe for spring break, things like that. Whereas a lot of our students, they don't even leave Longview. I've had students who have never been outside of the city limits, and it's not that big of a place. Like they don't go anywhere else. And so they don't know what people in Europe might think about this topic. They don't know what it's like to go eat pizza in New York City or to visit with people on a subway. They don't know those things. And so using AR, VR is a way for us to sort of bridge that gap. So one of the things is lack of schema. So they don't know how to build real world things because they don't know what that is. So having kids go into AR, VR and really manipulate things and take it apart and explore it and see it from every angle starts to build some of that foundation for them. It's not going to be the exact same, but it's a start. And so it's at least a way to sort of get them to where they need to be.
And Allie, I'll just add to that real quick. My former campus was a middle school, and we used to discuss the opportunities students had to get out, you know, of the classroom and see different things. And we realized that in Longview, Texas, where we work, there was one escalator in the entire city. It was at Sears, which has closed now.
It
And
doesn't
a lot of our
exist.
students had never, a lot of our students had never been to Sears and gone up an escalator. I mean, it was those sort of things where they didn't know what that was. They'd never seen it before. They may have seen it at a movie. They didn't know what it was called. And so we have to make those connections with students that have no background for any of those. You know, it's something that we take for granted and feel like has been around forever and know how to use and all that stuff. They have no idea that it even exists or what it's called or how to use it. And we have to find a way to reach them, you know, educationally and give them those experiences without leaving the classroom in most cases, especially this year.
Okay, our next one is lack of opportunities. It kind of all builds together. You'll see everything's kind of intertwined. But because our students don't always have access to opportunities, this lets them get in there and really explore with engineering and math and science. I grew up in DFW, and it was so easy to just take a field trip to the Pro Museum and look at something. Or we had an automotive shop like on our campus, and we had people that actually took apart engines in the middle of fourth period, and then they went to science. We don't have those things. We have other amazing programs in Longview like meat packing and other things, but we don't have all of those opportunities just because of our location. And I know there's other parts of Texas, especially like in West Texas, where it's just so remote that they, even if they want to and they have the money, they just can't get to those things. So bringing in AR, VR really allows our kids to at least have an opportunity to work on engines and to look at how things work and to pull apart the layers of a body if we can't get things here. And so that's a really great opportunity for our kids. And it's, again, a unique experience, which is what Gen Z really thrives on. They want something that's different. It's unique. They don't want to just look at a textbook or see your slide deck. They want something that they can interact with.
Right. I think to that, you know, speaking to the opportunities too, Allie, you know, we always say here, kind of our motto on campus is that we want to give every student every opportunity to be successful outside of school. We don't know where they're going to go. We don't know if they want to go to college or what they want to do with their life. And most of them don't know either. And that's fine. But we want them to have that opportunity, and giving them those experiences like that, you know, to the opportunity to take apart an engine, you know, in virtual reality, or to learn about the human body and the muscles and the bones and everything without having to leave the classroom. It's giving them that opportunity to, you know, to understand that and have a depth of knowledge and background knowledge. So when they do decide someday, hey, you know what, I've decided I want to go, you know, I don't know, be a pediatrician or something, they have the background knowledge there already. We want them to have every opportunity to do anything they want to do in life, and they have to have those experiences to be able to accomplish that.
Okay, our next one is lack of time and resources. Kind of the same thing. We don't have time to just take a field trip to a place just to look at some layers of something. We also don't always have the resources. So there's a lot of schools and a lot of years where the budget is just no, like, I'm sorry, we don't have the budget to bring in things for your kids to dissect for one day. Like, we just don't have that. And so if you can invest in AR, VR, that's essentially a timeless investment, because you're never having to pull in those supplies again, because you already have it. So it's not going to become a thing of, oh, well, we don't have pigs this year, but last year's kids got to do that. It's just, it's part of the system. So that's a really nice thing. And then also, there's a lot of resources that we can't physically get, like looking at atoms, things like that. We can't get the resources for that, even if we wanted to. So it provides that experience for our kids again.
I think a lot of that, you know, I was a science teacher, and every year that budget was a big thing. So we would have to buy whatever we wanted to dissect. If it was frogs or cow eyes or something, we had to, you know, find the exact number, buy a few extras just in case. And all that can be done in virtual reality without having to deal with, you know, squeamish kids or the smell of dead animals or something like that. And even in CTE programs, the things that they purchase, you know, that can be done in virtual reality without having to buy physical materials and spend money on that. And that's really changed the way we think about, you know, how we buy materials moving forward. Is, do we need that, or can we do that in virtual reality or AR, you know, to give our students that same experience or even a better one in some cases?
Yeah, it's also great for, like, if you have kids that are absent on dissection day, you're not going to get that stuff back out so that they can participate, but you can quickly say, okay, we'll go over and let's do that and be part of that. Kind of going back to, I was a struggling student. I was also just a really hard-headed, difficult student, which is still very much who I am today. But I'll never forget when I was in biology class, I was so disgusted by cutting open something that I literally said, you can't legally make me do this activity. Like, I'm not doing it. You can't by law force me to do that. And so my teacher gave me a paper frog to cut out and color and glue together. And when I tell you I learned nothing from that project, I learned nothing from that project. I enjoyed coloring, but I didn't actually get anything from it. And so if you could take that kind of student and move them over to AR, VR, where they aren't having to slice something open, they don't have to deal with the smell that makes them nauseous. It really is just a really nice in between, and they actually get a lot more out of it because there's notes and there's labels and there's things for them to interact with that they can't just do on a table. Okay, so those things kind of start to create some equity in education. You'll see that these aren't fully balanced because I don't believe that they ever really will be balanced. Families that have a whole lot of money are still going to have more genuine experiences than something that we can offer them in a classroom, but it's going to get us closer to that. So it's starting to get there.
También.
Josh, do you want to talk about this before I play it?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is something that we did with zSpace when we were implementing it on my campus at a middle school. And one of the things, what we really want to talk about a lot today is how, we found a resource for AR, VR, and we thought, okay, this is going to be great. This is going to give us so many opportunities that we wrote down and said, okay, here we can do this and we can do this and we can do this. The things that came out of that we never planned for are really the amazing stories. In this case, this short video clip is about one of my former students named Judith, who was a newcomer to the United States. She didn't speak English, and she was able to keep up and interact with a virtual reality and augmented reality platform because there was no language barrier. And she's going to speak a little bit about that in this video, where she says, basically, I was able to learn, at the same pace as the other kids. There was no translating. There was no, waiting for someone to come, translate and tell me what this is actually saying. She was able to learn at the same rate, at the same way, and she really loved the experience and she got a lot out of it. So go ahead, Allie.
Mi experiencia fue que me asombré con cómo la tecnología ha avanzado tanto para apoyarnos en los estudios, en todo eso. zSpace podría ser muy beneficiario porque es visual, entonces tú lo puedes ver cómo sería o cómo se miraría. It's gonna be more beneficial because it's visual and the language doesn't matter. It's awesome. I love it.
And so coming from a district where the majority of our students are English language learners, this is another opportunity for us to interact and engage them where they may not have been able to in the past because there is no language barrier when it comes to something visual and engaging like AR, VR can be.
Oh, sorry, I went too far. Okay, our next thing is creating abstract understanding. If you look at a lot of the TEKS or the state standards, depending on where you're at, we're asking kids to really process information and make concrete understanding of abstract things that they really can't do yet. And so this is a really great thing with AR, VR. It's really important to note that our kids physically, their brain doesn't develop for this concept until they're at least 12. That's kind of when they start to get it. It doesn't really solidify until they're in their 20s. And so when we're asking kids to understand these really abstract concepts, they physically can't always do it. They can get close. They might be able to fake understanding, but they're not really understanding it because it's too abstract for them. And so AR, VR really sort of takes those really abstract concepts and gives kids a concrete example and a way to interact with it. I was training one of my 6th grade science teachers last week, and we were looking at the solar system because those are their TEKS for the upcoming unit. And we were talking about, how kids don't understand the size of the planets and they don't understand how big the solar system really is or how it really works or how the planets are really different. I can't just take a kid to Jupiter and throw them in to see how big that would be. They would also burn up, but can't do that. But I can take them into zSpace and have them look at the universe. And there's activities where they can compare the size and they can compare the atmospheres and things like that. And so kids can actually like have a hands-on opportunity to interact with those big ideas that we can't just go outside and say, look, there it is, go touch it. And so being able to actually interact with it starts to build those concrete understandings of those abstract ideas.
Well, that hands-on approach, I mean, that's so much better than just a YouTube video or, you know, some pictures of talking about planets or atoms or something. We can watch YouTube videos all day, but they're not that engaged with that. They might like the colors and the sounds and the graphics, but when you actually put them in charge of their learning, when they're manipulating, you know, a planet or an atomic model or something, they're going to learn it better. They're going to remember it better. They're going to care a lot more.
Okay, moving on to engage. Kind of going back to what I said earlier, you can't passively learn with AR, VR. It forces the student to really get in there, be immersed, be engaged, be active in their learning. And there's not an opportunity for a sit and get if you're actually using AR, VR. That kind of goes with our attention span. So earlier I talked about how 51% of students in Gen Z really learn by doing, and that's a perfect thing for AR, VR. They don't do well with lectures. I don't do well with lectures. Even through both of our grad programs, when I had lectures, it was a struggle for me to actually get through it and do something with that information. And I'm an adult whose brain is formed. So that's even harder for our kids to do. And so it requires them to be actively learning. I don't know where I was at. Was I on this one? Okay. And then just memory retention, because they can actually see it and experience it, they're going to remember it a whole lot better than just a stagnant 2D image or a lecture, things like that. Josh, is there anything you want to add into that?
Well, I think that kind of comes back to what we were just saying, that, you know, you can give them a worksheet, or you can, you know, actually show them a YouTube video or something, and those things are still great. You can do them, but they're not going to learn as well as they would if they were actually immersed in that experience.
Kind of going back to the ADD thing I mentioned earlier, so many of our students are ADD or have similarities to that. And if you're not familiar with the ADD brain, it's just kind of always going and like looking for things and trying to find things to connect to. And so I know when I watch a video of something, I don't last very long. Josh gets on at me all the time because I have to just pause a movie and go get up and like walk to the kitchen to get water or something. Like I just have to go do something. And so with things like AR, VR, it's an opportunity for me to go do something. And it's not just this like really boring thing to sit through or something that my old teacher thinks is cool because it was awesome 20 years ago. Like it's the thing that's actually relevant for kids, and it's engaging, it's interactive, and they're going to remember that because they're doing it. Okay, next we're talking about thinking outside the box. So I feel like when we started our AR VR journey, and Josh, you can correct me if I'm wrong, we really just kind of wanted kids to see some stuff. Like we were like, hey, it'd be cool if we could just pop them into this place and they could like look around. And then we started really going through that journey, and we realized there's all these other things that you can do with AR VR, and really starting to think outside the box. It's not just for science. It's not just for putting the like headset style on, like looking around at something. There's just so much more that you can do with it. And so we're gonna just kind of talk through some of that for a few minutes. Josh, why don't you tell them about this part? The ELA.
Yeah, so like I was saying earlier, it's the things that we don't plan for with Z-Space that keep, and AR, you know, it doesn't have to be Z-Space. It can be AR, VR from some other platform, but including that into your curriculum, it's the things you don't plan for. Like Ali was saying, we just wanted to have an innovative STEAM program. We knew that AR, VR was a part of that. And what ended up happening was we brought it to campus, we trained the teachers, we started using it on a regular basis, and all of a sudden these opportunities came up that we never expected. In this case, the picture at the top left here, this was my 7th grade writing team. These two teachers reading and writing. They absolutely bought into the idea that they could utilize Z-Space to teach their reading lesson. And in the process of doing that, they were reading a story about an athlete with prosthetic limbs, and they came to me. They wanted to do a makerspace STEAM project for it because they thought there'd be something there. And I said, oh, well, let me introduce you to our AR/VR platform, that we didn't think the ELAR teachers would really get anything out of, if we're being honest.
We didn't even train
And
them.
all of a sudden they had all these great ideas. Yeah, we didn't train ELAR teachers. We trained science teachers and history teachers and math teachers. So all of a sudden they had these great ideas and they just ran with them. And our students used that virtual reality platform to break apart prosthetic limbs in Z-Space that came with, I think it's in the Z-Space demo. It wasn't even any of the other content. It was just the demo version of it, where they could see how prosthetic limbs worked. And they had their students create, cardboard and plastic and rubber versions of prosthetic limbs. And that was part of their big project. It's the way that, we're using it in science every day, we're using it in math, and all of a sudden the ELAR teachers find a way to implement it. And it just kind of shocks you that's something we never thought would happen. And they loved it, and the students loved it. It was a great way for them to learn. So then they came back to me every time they wanted to do something, to say, hey, what can we do now? What else can you show us in virtual reality to engage our students and get them excited about a project we're doing or something we're learning?
It also opened some interesting doorways on campus, because when we met with the other departments and trained them and showed them like, hey, this is so awesome, some teachers bought in and they were like, hey, this is great. And then you always have that group that's kind of like, meh, I don't think that's for me. I don't know how I'm going to fit that in. And so when the ELAR teachers just like came through, like using Z-Space and doing all this awesome stuff, it really started to show people like, this isn't just for science or biology. Like, you really can get creative and find a way to link that in and make a cross-curricular thing to whatever it is you're doing. And so we really were able to start kind of having interesting conversations with teachers that we weren't initially able to really have. They weren't really open to it yet. But this sort of paved the way for that. One of the things we also did last year, unfortunately, because of COVID, we weren't able to finish it, but I'm going to include it anyways. So we have a Girls Power group on campus, and it's a group of girls. They stay after school. They do different projects every year. And last year, we somehow fell into this opportunity with Kevin to tag along to see what UNT and Denton was doing with Z-Space at the university level. And I don't know how we got that lucky. We somehow found ourselves talking to UNT, and we spoke to the director of their, what was the name of that department? It was like research and fashion design.
Merchandising,
yeah.
Merchandising, thank you, that's the word. And we decided that it would be really cool to do a kind of group project between our middle school girls and their university level classes. And so we partnered with their Monday afternoon class from like 4 to 5:30 or so. And essentially we followed the same design cycle. And part of that included looking at how things were structured and designed in Z-Space. And then from there, our girls went and they started designing their own products or houses or whatever it is that they really wanted to work on, what they felt driven by. And then we came back, in this picture, you can see it, we did a Zoom with our girls and their class at the same time. And so we could see them working. We got to interview the university students and really talk about the design process and how they're using Z-Space. And that was right before shutdown. The plan after spring break, if we had come back, was for our girls to start going into like Tinkercad and stuff and building their actual stuff using Z-Space so that they could like pull it out and see it from every angle and dissect it and find ways to improve on their design. And then eventually, if we could 3D print them, then we would have 3D printed them. But that all kind of got put on hold because of COVID. And then most of our girls now are at the high school. So that project is kind of just fizzed out. But it was a really awesome experience and connection for our kids because of AR/VR. We were able to partner with this university doing the same thing with their AR/VR. And so it was really awesome just to kind of create those connections and show kids like this journey is completely possible for you. Even if you're a 12-year-old kid, this is something that if you're interested in, you could go do. Like they're doing these same things at the higher level. And
Well,
then
it's that opportunity that they've already done it. Sorry, Allie.
Mm-hmm.
It's that opportunity that they've already done it in middle school. So they know they can do it when they get to college as well. So they loved it. They enjoyed it. Talking with the college students was an amazing opportunity for them. So it was great.
Yeah. And then the last thing is Josh and I spent a lot of time on the curriculum alignment side. We knew for our teachers and our students, if we weren't tying it to curriculum and to our performance data, that we were really kind of falling short in the launch of this and the implementation. So I think this was last summer. Is that right, Josh? We sat down and we pulled all of either the STAR data or our common assessments throughout the year data. And we found a really low TEKS, so things that our kids just are not getting. They're continually struggling with. We looked at some TEKS and the patterns of how kids just aren't getting it throughout the years. And we said, okay, let's go find something in Z-Space and AR/VR that could support that. And that could be used in their stations when they're learning it, or before testing season, they could be part of the review. So kids get an opportunity to really experience it again. And so the data here is really supporting that what we were doing was not working. The only downside to STAR being canceled last year because of shutdown is I don't have any data to show you it is working, but I can tell you it's working because our kids are actually able to have conversations about those concepts. They can tell you about the inside of an atom and how if you move it around, things like that, like it now suddenly makes sense and it's working for them. And so this was a really important step in our implementation process that just kind of has to be done for your school and really look at how that's going to work with your students and support your teachers.
Well, I think that's an important aspect of it. You know, yes, we wanted to add an AR/VR platform, and yes, initially we did want it just because we thought it was cool and the kids would really like it and enjoy the experience. But when we really broke it down and found how we could use it in our actual TEKS, as Kevin put in the chat, our state standards, yes, a lot of it aligned, and it was easy to align a lot of it with it. But through, you know, continuously using that particular platform, we've also found where we can make our own lessons. We can create, you know, an entire presentation for students to complete, where we have them go, you know, and inspect certain objects and pull them apart and understand how they work and why they work, which is a whole other level of learning. And the potential is there for the students to make their own lessons, you know, to teach other students. Now, that was something that was in the works towards the end of last year, was having our 8th graders make a lesson, a virtual reality lesson for our 6th graders so that they could complete. All of those things are completely possible. And having a platform that allows you to not only use their immersive content, but also create content that you need for your own students or your own state, depending on what your standards are, or grade level or content area. And that makes all the difference. The fact that we can just pull what's in there and students can still get that experience, but it's actually teaching them what they need to learn to be successful on our state tests. That's huge. I mean, that makes all the difference in the world. That's all I got, Allie. Go ahead.
Okay.
Well,
Sorry. Okay, so this is kind of our closing up, but we want to point out that this is our son, Ben. That he's now 4, but this is from back when he was 2. And Ben absolutely loves AR/VR. And this is just really, I think it's going to be the norm for the next generation. So just how I talked about earlier, technology and Chromebooks, that's just part of our kids and how they learn. And I think as we see this next generation of littles really grow into elementary, middle, and high school, I think this is going to be part of just, this is how we learn. When Ben was 2, every time we would go to school, he's like, I want to do Z-Space. I want to do Z-Space. And he could figure out the pen. He could figure out how to move things around. And so it was really fun. And you can kind of see, like in this video or this activity, it's an elephant. I couldn't just take Ben to go turn an elephant over to see what an elephant's stomach looked like. But because of AR/VR, he was able to experience that and interact with it and like play with it. And it was just so fun. He talked about it for days. And so I want to challenge you guys to think about how AR/VR shouldn't really be like this is a fun thing to do for the day, or what a cool thing we can bring in. It really needs to be part of just your curriculum and how your students teach, and part of the pedagogy at the heart of your school, because it really does transform learning and engagement and does some really awesome things for students. Josh, you want to add anything to that? You good?
No, I think you definitely got it,
Okay.
Allie. You did mention that it's something that you think should be used as we move forward. I really think it absolutely should be in classrooms if we want to engage students to the level that they need to be engaged, especially with our current generation and the current state of the world. To engage students the way they need to be engaged to learn, AR and VR is one of the easiest and most interesting ways to do that.
Well, Josh and Allie, we are so appreciative of the time that you spent putting together this presentation, delivering the presentation, but more importantly, the time that you've spent with your students, serving them to be able to collect the stories and the data that you shared with everyone this morning. I don't believe I overstated it when I said that these are two of the most innovative, creative, talented, skilled young educators. And I walk away from a session like this, a webinar, filled with hope. At a time when people are feeling maybe a little bit of despair, or is there light at the end of the tunnel? Is there a sense of hope? You just need to listen to educators like Josh and Allie, and more importantly, their students. So I know you all have the opportunity, because you're in the field, to talk to educators and talk to students, and just encourage you to continue to fuel their fire of hope. And this webinar has actually been recorded, so you'll be able to share this recording. You'll have it by sometime tomorrow. So Amanda will send that to you, and you'll be able to share it with others. I know I'm going to be listening to it several times, because there were so many nuggets of great information that Josh and Allie shared today. And there were some wonderful questions that came from the group. So before we sign off, I wanted to make sure that those questions were answered and not left unaddressed. The first question came from Cliff Hudson. And Cliff, I don't know where you're from. Cliff, are you out there? You can come off mute, actually. Cliff, are you there?
I think Cliff had to jump off the call a bit early.
Yeah.
I tried messaging him regarding his question, but it might be a great question for the group.
It is. One of the things that Cliff said, how much is too much with technology? And what do you do when technology doesn't work? So those are two questions that he loved everything that he was hearing, and complimented the information, but did ask that question. Josh and Allie, would you like to address that?
Yeah, so I'm an instructional technology specialist, so I feel like my job is in some way to push ed tech, but I'm the first one to tell you that your class should never just be full technology. I have a lot of teachers that want to just go fully digital. That's an absolute mistake in my mind. Kids still need pen and paper. They still need to interact with things. They still need to build and create and do things that are tactile. And I think if you're only going one way or the other, for one, you're going to miss a ton of kids and their learning preference. But I think going all digital is just as bad as only having pen and paper in a textbook. And there needs to be some blend and give in that. I'm also a really big proponent of choice boards, whether those are digital or hands-on, and giving kids the opportunity to choose their learning style and choose how they want to learn, how they want to create, because kids know what works best for them. You can give them 4 options. They're going to say, I don't want to do that, and I don't want to do that, but I don't mind doing this one, and I really would rather do that one. And so if you have a situation where the technology goes down, always kind of have another option for them, have something else that they can explore until it comes back up. And then it's also sometimes an opportunity to say, hey, bud, like, this isn't going to work right now, so let's move to option 2, and whatever that might be. Or they could even do some extra studies, on their phone, or go to the library and get an actual book if you still have a library in your campus. Some of mine, I don't know if they're trying to get rid of them or not, but we got to keep libraries. And so I think that's really, too much technology is bad. It's bad for me. It's bad for our students. There has to be a blend, but I think having no technology or too little technology is also just as bad.
Thank you, Allie. So another question came from Matthew Doherty, no relation, but spelled the same way, the correct way, I might add, Matthew. Matthew asked, why Z-Space versus the Oculus 2 Quest? So that's a device that he is currently using for virtual reality, and just wondering, why? So a little compare and contrast on that.
Well, I can tell you, we certainly looked at the Oculus as an option when we were looking for an AR VR platform, and we kept hitting some walls with implementing that in our campus because of our internet and network. It just simply would not work. That we every time I went to the technology department to Allie and her team, they were just telling me, no, I'm sorry, you're gonna have to find something else because there were internet constraints. There were so many issues, honestly, that we ran into going that route. That ZSpace just worked a lot better for us. It may not work for everybody, but it definitely worked better for us, and we are very glad that we went that route. I think Oculus is great. It's really cool. It's immersive. Um, I don't know that Oculus is very geared towards education like ZSpace is and geared towards content. So that was one of the biggest things for us was ZSpace was geared towards content, and it worked with our network and it worked in our classroom situations.
Thank you very much, Josh. We need to wrap up, but there were a lot of questions around, can you use this AR VR learning platform on other devices like Chromebooks and so forth? So people were curious about that. So we will follow up with all of our contact information as you have Josh and Allie's contact information as well, and feel free to reach out to them. We're devoted to building a network of individuals like yourselves. So hopefully this is the first of many conversations that we'll have in the days, weeks, and months to come. So we wish you a wonderful rest of the day. Thanks again so much to Josh and Allie and the ZSpace team here. Amanda, is there any parting words before we sign off the webinar for today?
No, other than what you mentioned, Kevin, that the recording as well as the slides will be shared with everybody. Probably by end of today, but by tomorrow for sure.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. We appreciate y'all for spending time with us. Have a great day.